Hello everyone, welcome to this lesson. We are focusing on purchasing power parity theory, which is the last segment of this topic of exchange rate, A-level economics exchange rate. So let's talk about purchasing power parity theory, known as the 3Ps theory. So what it does is that by definition, it talks about exchange rate should adjust so that the same goods cost the same in each country. So purchasing power parity theory simply states that if you are producing the same goods and services in one country, they should cost the same price when you go to the other country if you want to exchange those currencies together. So that's why it is saying that you should adjust to make sure that each and every country are using the same value of money to buy the same value of goods and services from another country. So the purchasing power parity theory simply reflects the purchasing power of a country into this currency, how it's going to be used in a different countries. So it's very important to understand the purchasing power parity theory seeks to explain how the purchasing power of one currency can have the same effect on the other country. So let's look at how it works. So same goods equals same buying power. So we're trying to say that in terms of purchasing power, we expect that the same value of goods and services being sold in Zimbabwe and those being sold in the USA are supposed to have the same value in terms of purchasing power. We're supposed to be able to buy those same goods and services with the same amount of money. So if prices differ, exchange rates adjust over time. So one of the other things that you should know is that exchange rate will be able to adjust over time to match the changes in purchasing power parity theory in different countries, because sometimes you might have economic disparities between countries, but over time, in the long run, we're supposed to see purchasing power parity theory taking effect over time, whereby the exchange rate will tend to adjust because of the market forces of demand and supply. Okay, so let's look at the examples in the USA and Zimbabwe. So we are trying to say, remember we talked about the exchange rate between the US dollar and the Zimbabwean ZiG being $1 equals to 26 ZiG. So we are simply trying to say that if the price of a burger is $1 in the US economy, in the USA, we're expecting that it's supposed to buy the same, have the same buying power in terms of trying to reflect that purchasing power parity theory is still applicable. It is still working, it's still showing the effects. Okay, so we have another example here. Example where we talk about USA and Zimbabwe, expecting that in that exchange rate that you talked about, at $1 is equal to 26 ZiG. We're supposed to see the price of burger being $1, but the price of burger here in Zimbabwe being also 26 ZiG, reflecting $1. So same purchasing power parity theory is supposed to hold in Zimbabwe and also in the USA. That's what I'm trying to reflect here. That's what we mean by purchasing power parity theory, but it adjusts in the long term. In the long run, we're supposed to see the same value of goods and services, the same price of goods and services being able to be bought in the USA and also in terms of the value of the ZiG. Okay, so let's look at the implication of using purchasing power parity theory. What are some of the limitations that comes when we are trying to talk about this theory on a realistic approach? So the first thing is that it works best in the long run, which means usually we have different economies which have different economic systems, which have different economic systems that they're using in terms of even the quality of the goods and services that are going to produce, even the factors of production, how they are using them. So it very much depends on the methods of production. So these are some of the things that come into place whereby you're looking at developed economies and developing economies having to look at how we can reflect purchasing power parity theory in the long run. So in the short run, this theory doesn't simply tell us about the purchasing power parity theory between two countries, because it shows effect in the long run, because the exchange rate is to adjust to match the purchasing power parity theory, which might take a long time. Okay, at the same time, it doesn't not always hold because of certain issues that we can talk about. We have different taxes in different countries. The taxes that are being charged in USA are different from the taxes that are being charged in Zimbabwe. We can also talk about the tariffs. This is the input tax, which is put on goods to make them more expensive through a tariff. And also, you can have countries which have tariffs and countries doesn't have tariffs in terms of the percentage of tax that they are charging when we are importing certain goods from other countries. Also, we talk about the local cost. The costs differ from one country to the other, that it might be expensive to produce certain goods and services in Zimbabwe than it might be able to produce in the USA. Same here, given example of the burger, it might have cost Zimbabwe a lot of money for them to produce the burger than it does in the USA in terms of resources, in terms of also the cost of them having availability of the available raw materials to produce the ingredients. Are they easily available that they can produce the same burger and the same price that they've been charged in the USA than they charge in Zimbabwe? So it's very important to know that purchasing power parity theory doesn't simply reflect the country's exchange rate in terms of using one currency in the other country when you are talking about in the short-run perspective. But when we're looking at it in the long run, we tend to see that exchange rates tend to adjust to accommodate those changes using the force of demand and supply. So this is purchasing power parity theory. Thank you so much for watching the rest of the video. The playlist of exchange rate, I will see in the next video when you talk about other topics. Thank you and subscribe.